man, Psaki. I find it, the more and more I watch her content, she is not good at this at all. She is literally living off her guests. She, like herself, not good at this job. But let's listen. This is a very interesting interview on the topic of Palestinian support.
How do we grapple with the crisis there? Joining me now is Democratic Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal. She's the chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining me today. I wanted to start with your calls for the ceasefire in Gaza, given the horrific impact on civilians we've all been watching. There have been a range of calls for ceasefires and different versions of it. So I just wanted to ask you, when you call for a ceasefire, are you saying you want Israel's military operation to end, full stop, and not restart? Are there parameters of a military campaign that you would be comfortable with at any point?
Are you saying we should stop bombing kids? Like, you got to realize what she just asked, and people don't realize how crazy that. You actually saying we should stop bombing kids? Let's continue. That's a crazy question.
That's literally the question she's asking.
Thanks, Jen, and thanks for having me on. When I call for a ceasefire, that means a stoppage immediately of Israel's bombing and attacks, airstrikes, as well as the ground attacks, in order to make sure that we can get the hostages back and that we can get humanitarian aid into Gaza and that we have a plan for how to move forward. I don't think the question is about whether we should allow Israel to take out Hamas and whether all the international allies would be in favor of taking out Hamas. That is absolutely true. The question is how to do that. And there is increasing toll, both with civilians in Gaza, violence in the West Bank, but also a question of whether when you kill thousands and thousands of Palestinians and thousands of children and you bomb refugee camps, even if you are taking out some Hamas leaders, and it isn't clear to me exactly who is being taken out, but let's say you are, the reality is if you keep doing that, you will radicalize the population and another Hamas will arise. Most of the top leaders of Hamas are not even in Gaza, they're in other countries. And so I think we have to be clear that we need a ceasefire. And when I say ceasefire, I understand that you can't ever have a permanent ceasefire. That's not really that's not really realistic. But what you do is you call for a ceasefire. It is a negotiated settlement, which is why I say that you can at least have a cessation of hostilities immediately. But I do think that we need to recognize that this crisis is not going to end and Hamas is not going to be taken out unless there is a political situation that allows both Israelis and Palestinians to coexist with self-determination next to each other. And that is something that can't happen while Israel is continuing to bomb and kill innocent civilians in Gaza.
There's no question there needs to be a diplomatic solution here, Congresswoman. And it sounds like
we can pause here if you wanted to before she asks her next question. Yeah, go ahead.
So apparently, even the people who are getting this issue right in the House, progressive House, that are actually calling for ceasefire, their take is still trash, fam. So Bernie, we're gonna cover Bernie later, who reputation is forever tied to the genocide supporters. Like, he's just horrific on this. But even the people that call for a ceasefire, their position is not good because she made it clear here that she wants to squash Palestinian resistance. She wants the United States to squash them all. That's what she said. Of course, it's not going to be forever. It can't be temporary. And she mentioned we need to get rid of Hamas. So progressives, their position is we need to find another way to squash Palestinian resistance without radicalizing more people so more people want to fight against the state of Israel. They are taking armed resistance, which is legal, off the table on behalf of the ruling class. So the position is that we should have, the Palestinians can work among themselves what they believe the best method of resistance is, whether it's Hamas or other things. But what we don't do is take options off the table, especially when you're part of the most violent institution in human history. Especially when our taxpayer money finances the method of war that Hamas is just copying. Israel created and set the terms of engagement.
Yes.
So they still got to throw this Hamas bullshit in there. And I'm going to debunk more of this later in my next segment, but we can let it continue. But even the people calling for ceasefire, they still are working on behalf of crushing Palestinian resistance. That's what I got from that answer. So even the best among people are not so bad.
That's what I was gonna say, and we get this from, and I had the same sort of critique for Crystal Ball, who was on some show, and Emma was shouting her out as doing a good job. I did a whole segment it's like, yeah, but your critique is still missing this. It still was a blind spot. But let's listen a little more to this interview. It gets spicier as it goes along. She's gonna require her to answer her on the genocide question. And this is the first time you'll ever see Jen. This will illustrate how Jen Psaki understands how to push back against a guest. She just makes decisions on when to do it and when not to do it. So let's listen.
You are open to Israel using military action if it's more targeted, if the hostages are out, if there's assistance in. You're not determining that, but you're open to resumption of that. I did want to ask you, as Speaker of...
You see how it's so important to her to get out that her guest, Pramila Jayapal, is not saying to get rid of all. You see how she needs to make that clear? Like, I need to make sure everybody understands you're not saying that. You're saying as long as all this other stuff is happening, we can still be doing it as long as it's targeted. We know what targeted means when Israel says targeted. They're saying targeted now, Jen. But you see how it's important for her to get that out. But let's listen.
Emerita Nancy Pelosi said a ceasefire is a gift to Hamas. And Hillary Clinton said the same thing, and that people demanding a ceasefire don't understand Hamas. It sounds like you don't agree with that. But what would you say about their views?
I just don't agree with that. And I think if you look at the history of how these conflicts have happened, and even, I'm not talking about progressives who have said this. I'm talking about national security experts on terrorism, who have written extensively about instances where countries have gone in, including Israel, into Lebanon, including the United States, going into Iraq. And what happens when you do not, when you essentially go in without a plan for how you move forward? You might succeed, Jen, in the immediate short term. You may be able to declare victory of taking out one leader or another. You do not solve the problem. And I think this is very important. And I also think it's important to recognize that the United States is increasingly isolated by saying that we are not.
I thought that this was very important. This is why I thought it was important to play her interview, because she talks about the United States isolation, which you don't hear that phrase. You don't hear isolation and the United States being isolated from any politician under any circumstance on any topic. So I thought that was very telling. Let's listen. Let her finish out.
And one thing I want to show how unhinged Jen Psaki and her entire ideology is, because this is the message of the Biden administration. A ceasefire would benefit Hamas. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? Remember when they said peace in Ukraine would benefit Putin?
How is that possible? How is it
peace in Libya would benefit Gaddafi? You can't have peace in Syria. The point of peace is that inherently everyone benefits. That's what peace means. You psychopaths. Everyone benefits in peace. So the warmonger position is we can't have peace because the other side would benefit. Yes, that would mean to wage war, to completely subjugate and destroy the other side. When you want peace, you want both sides to benefit, to save human lives. So the United States position on every war, we can't pull out of Iraq. That will help the terrorists. That will help these people. That's a warmonger, psychopathic argument that the ruling class makes all the time, and they don't even realize how crazy it is. If peace helps the enemy every single time, CJ, maybe you're the bad guy. Maybe, just maybe.
Facts.
That's crazy, but let's continue.
Do not solve the problem. And I think this is very important. And I also think it's important to recognize that the United States is increasingly isolated by saying that we are not ready to call for a ceasefire, that we are standing with Israel no matter what. That allows impunity for Israel to continue to do what it has done and is doing to Palestinians, killing children. I mean, Jen, I just have to say, one Palestinian child is being murdered every 10 minutes at the rate of killings that is happening now. Nobody has forgotten
Like,
what
I don't
Hamas
give a
has
fuck.
done to Israel on
That's crazy.
October 7th. I have condemned that. It is horrific. It is a terrorist act. Israel absolutely should, and the allies, including United States, should go after Hamas, should try to end,
See?
take out Hamas and find other
There we go. This is
You're
the
calling
part
for
that
the
keeps her
death
at the
of
table.
Palestinian
Yeah.
children. So I'm not allowing these people to whitewash their position. So just because you call for a ceasefire, don't mean you're on the right side of this. So you have Israel that say we view all the Palestinians as Hamas. You have Israel that's openly saying we're about to kill kids. Anyone, we're willing to kill 50 kids to kill one Hamas agent. You don't give those psychopaths permission to do what they want to do. And they complain like, oh my God, why they killing kids? They told you guys that's what
Yep.
it means to get rid of Hamas. Fam, you guys realize why Hamas exists? The Israeli reason for why Hamas existed to this point is because they didn't know what the fuck Hamas was. CJ, you guys know that? They don't know where Hamas is. And now, ever since October 7th, we know because the leaked memo showed that they wanted to expel all Palestinians from Gaza. But what they're now saying is they went from not knowing where Gaza is, now they know exactly where every single hospital where they're at, you know, every single tunnel and every single school. They went from not knowing where the fuck they at, now they know exactly with pinpoint accuracy. Is that what you really believe? Pramila Jayapal or anyone with this weak ass position of calling for the ceasefire but allowing Israel to go after Hamas? That's we cannot let these people off. So I am willing to have a rational position on this where I'm like, yo, I'm glad that she has a ceasefire position, but that is not enough, fam. Like this shit where they give permission of Israel to kill people. What the ceasefire for at that point? You just want to take a break. Come on, everyone, take 5. Let's give everyone some snacks. Let's take care of everyone boo-boos. Let's take care of everyone injuries, and then let the genocide commence later. Like, what is that position? That makes no sense. You guys understand? I hope I make my point correctly. I hope I am. I think that's completely incompatible, and she don't even realize it. But let's continue.
Like, you can't have a position of still funding Israel and say keep Palestine, keep like those are incompatible. But let's continue.
Solutions, but this is not the way to do it. And the United States is the largest backer, Jen, of military aid to Israel. The idea that we cannot do anything about what Israel is doing, I do not think is, it's just not credible. The reality is that if Israel continues to go in that direction, I think taxpayers who are paying for that deserve to be able to know that the United States is holding Israel accountable to what President Biden has rightly said in calling for Israel to follow international humanitarian law. They are not doing that right now, Jen.
Yeah, Congresswoman, I think this is such a complicated, heartbreaking, difficult issue, which is why it's so important to discuss it with people like you. I did want to ask you about, because there's a lot of impacts here at home, as we're seeing. And a friend of yours, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, really
here is where AOC was put in a position like this, where you are put in a position to decide whether you are going to show you're with the establishment or you're going to lean on your progressive values. Your time to decide who are you with, and this is Pramila's time on the question of Palestine. And I've noticed, Nick, for the question of Palestine, I'm seeing that this is the issue that they have the most backbone. I'm not saying they have a fully formed backbone, but this is the one they seem to have grown, and I don't know what it is. It's just a moment, but it feels, and you see it yourself in my feed, for example, on Twitter, there's nothing but Israel, nothing but Palestine and Israel, literally nothing. I have to type in if I want to see something else. This is what is taking control. And maybe it's because what you said, the Palestinian community has been planning for this shit for so long. So they activated, and all of their comrades like us who here to support them is like, oh, they ready? Oh, they got a freaking rally? I'm showing up. Oh, they got that? I'm showing up. That you get what I'm saying? So that's what it feels like. So because they see the people in the streets, maybe that's giving them a little more spine to say a little more than what they have historically said on some other things. But whatever the case, I'm glad they're here. She said a lot of good things in this interview, a lot of bad things, but a lot of good things. Now let's see how she does on this question of genocide. Right, go ahead, Nick. Okay, go ahead.
Released a video on Friday about the war. I'm guessing, of course, you've seen it, but in case our viewers haven't, I just want to play a piece of it.
We will remember in 2024.
Now, you've been very outspoken about the need for a ceasefire, about the horrors, which we've talked about quite a bit as well in Gaza, but she's accusing President Biden of supporting what she described as the genocide of Palestinians in Gaza. I mean, do you agree with that description?
Now, of course, this is genocide. And now Jen is going to give the definition of genocide in a second, and then we'll apply it to this and see if it's true. But let's listen to the first attempt at this question, because Jen is going to push back when she feels she doesn't answer the question. And it's also telling that Pramila doesn't give an answer to the question. It's telling. So let's listen.
You know, Jen, this is heartbreaking. Rashida is the only Palestinian American woman in the United States Congress. She has a grandmother who lives in Israel, in the West Bank. And the reality is that she is bringing her lived experience to bear. I don't think we can say we want diversity of views, but then not listen to what those views are. I think genocide is a very, very complicated term. I believe that we have to do everything we can to elect Joe Biden president. You know that I have been an extremely strong supporter of President Biden on the domestic front.
How does that work? You want a ceasefire, but you want to support the guy who's saying no, who can't get a ceasefire done. I don't understand this strategy, to your point, Nick, earlier. I don't get this. I don't understand this strategy because it's not going to get her job. It's not going to make Palestinians safe. Your strategy is not going to do that. So that's what I don't get.
Yeah, I told you guys that Pramila Jayapal's job is to lose. She has a Medicare for All House bill that she never fought for once. You know what I mean? Her job is to be the professional loser for the left. So she supports a ceasefire, but her solution to get a ceasefire is to vote for Joe Biden. You guys see how she's leading people off a cliff, even when she's right. Like, this is about as good as it's going to get for Jayapal. Like, you know what I mean? The fight for a ceasefire. But even the best of Jayapal is still horrible, because even when she's advocating for something good, she's like, hey, y'all, I got a good idea. Let's advocate for a ceasefire, but let's support the guy who supports ceasefire. You know what I mean? If you remember your analogy about two sticks and rubbing together, like what she's doing here is actually very malicious and harms the left. And it's the reason why the left has been in the position that it is, because of people like her. So even as she's saying something good in general, she's still horrible in her delivery and her politics in general. But let's continue.
And I think it's important that we recognize, though, that the reality, and I have said this to the White House privately for many weeks and then recently publicly, because I think it is important to recognize that we have a very divided country, as you well know. You have said that polls really don't reflect where people are. I agree with you. But I will tell you, this is the first time, Jen, that I have felt like the 2024 election is in great trouble for the president and for our democratic control, which is essential to moving forward, because these young people, Muslim Americans, Arab Americans, but also young people, see this conflict as a moral conflict and a moral crisis. And they are not going to be brought back to the table easily with, if we do not address this.
No,
she's like, yeah, fuck all that shit, Palestinians, yeah. I need you to go over here and I need you on record saying that you're against what she's saying about genocide, so we can tell people and put this in ads. That's literally what she cares about. So let's
Yeah.
listen.
No doubt, Congressman. I think we are seeing a generational response to what's happening overseas. But language also matters. And genocide is defined as the intentional destruction of an entire ethnic or religious group. And a lot of people.
The intentional destruction of an entire religious group. Is that not what's going on, Nick?
That is
Ethnic or religion. That is literally what's going on. How dare you read the definition? You want her to say yes, I agree with her that this is genocide? You read the definition so that she will be forced. This is an intentional. How is it not? Is it the word intentional? Because they're saying they're not intending to kill 70%.
And that's not even true because they literally say it. You have Israel officials that literally said we need to get rid of Palestinians in Gaza. That all Palestinians are all Hamas, and there's no civilians. We need all the civilians are on the table. Like they are. So even by her definition, they are literally committing genocide because they are telling you what they want. They're telling you that they want these people to die, and they're executing it. You know what I mean? It's a fucking genocide. Let's continue.
Do listen to statements made by members of Congress. So I just want to be clear. Do you agree that with the description of this as genocide and the president's role in that?
I am not willing to say that yet, but I will just tell you that Rashida is not the first person to say this. There are credible reports from agencies across the world, and the United Nations has said we are hurtling towards the genocide of Palestinians. That is not an isolated view, but I think it is important for us to focus on what is actually here at the core, which is over 9,000, I think it's somewhere near 9,300 Palestinians have been killed, over 3,000 children, plus 6,600 Palestinian children killed. And I think that where are 2.3 million Palestinians going to go? Where are they going to go? The attacks on the refugee camps, we are talking about a half a mile for this refugee camp. That is the density of how many people live in that area. When you release bombs that are actually 2,000-pound bombs in a dense area, which is something the United States has signed on and said we will not do that, but Israel has not said that. That is what Israel did in the Jabalia refugee camp.
So what Pramila is doing here is very passive aggressive. It's very professional middle class. It's not a genocide, and then she goes about the points of how it's a genocide, because she's making a point that this can't be intentional. Jen, she's breaking down 2.7 million people live in Gaza, the most densely populated place on the planet. In that was a refugee camp. This, and this. They bombed that. You can't say this not intentionally killing civilians when you know the vast majority of the people there are exactly that. So she said no to the question, or she said, I'm not ready to go that far, but let me give you the points on why people would say this is a genocide. And that's exactly what she did. Nick, did you want to chime in before I let her finish here? Yeah, let's let her finish.
2,000-pound bombs, Jen. And so the horrors are terrible. I think there are families of hostages, Israeli hostages, who have gone to the ICC and said what Hamas did is also a war crime and qualifies as genocide. And I think we have to make sure that we are taking into account all the innocent civilians, Israeli and Palestinian. But at the end of the day, international humanitarian law exists because we have learned from our past that you cannot solve these problems by targeting innocent civilians. And